Hey guys, here's a short video to explain the differences between early Ghias, which are often called Lowlight Ghias, and later Ghias. So the Lowlight Ghias, like you see on the right here, went from late 55 production to towards the end of 59, and then starting at the end of 59 for the 60 model year, they went to the, I guess, the later style Ghia, like you see here on the right. This one's actually 61. So the name Lowlight Ghia, for those of you that don't know, actually comes from the fact that the lights on the Ghia are literally lower. So this is true for both the tail lights and the headlights. So if you look here where you can see both, you see how the tail lights are sitting much lower on the fender. You can see the fender is coming out here more or less horizontal, curves down and comes nearly vertical before the tail light actually starts. Now if you look over here at the later one, you see the fender is still more or less horizontal, and then the tail light is basically from there down. So just looking at these, you can see how much lower the tail lights actually sit on the earlier car. Let's go look at the front real quick here and you'll see it's kind of the same thing. So at least here you can see the Lowlight Ghia. You see the headlight sitting about here. So look at the curvature of the fender. You see it coming along here, more or less, again, horizontal. And then it starts curving down pretty sharply, and then the headlight is sitting down here. So again, it's sitting low on the fender. If you kind of take an imaginary line between the horizontal part of the fender and the headlight here, you can see it's kind of a good few inches below that imaginary horizontal line. Let's go take a look real quick at the later Ghia here. So again, this is a 61, and so here you can see the horizontal part of the fender is kind of coming along here, and then it pretty much stops and the headlight's sitting right there. So there's no real distance at all between the horizontal part of the fender and the headlight. So that's where the name Lowlight comes from. Again, the lights literally sit lower, and this is true on both the front of the car and the back of the car. So that's probably one of the most major differences. There's a lot of other subtle differences though. So you can see the air inlets on the front of the later Ghia, these kind of big shape that everyone's sort of used to. I don't even know what I would call that shape, but it's a Karmann Ghia air inlet shape. The earlier Ghias, the Lowlights, so had these much smaller grills that had these very kind of, I don't know, almost like mid-century mod looking fins on them. The overall opening was much smaller. It had a mesh grill in it, but there was no sort of surround on it or anything. It was really just these two fins that kind of look almost like they're suspended in space. So you compare that to the later one where there's a border all the way around it, and then it's got several fins running across. So very different looking. You can see there's some differences in in headlights. This is later style ones. So actually the later Lowlights pretty much had the same style. This is an earlier Lowlight, is a 57, so you can see it's a bit different as far as that housing is concerned. So another difference is in the bumpers. So up until the very end of the Lowlight era, so I think it was towards the latter part of the 59 production year, they looked like this, more or less like a blade style bumper with a couple of bumper guards there and there. Starting in late 59 at the end of the 59 production year, so still Lowlight Ghias, they actually did add overriders like this. You can see this car there, these are actually wrong. These should curve around the corner here and then terminate over here. This is actually a, I think, 70 and 71 overrider style on this 61, so this is not correct. But yeah, the very late Lowlights did have the overriders on them, a lot like you see there. Other than that, you know, the roof line, the overall shape of the body, pretty much the same. Some differences on the dash. Lowlights did not have a dash pad on them, which to me is much more beautiful. It's painted body color, as you can see here, versus the non-Lowlights, later Ghias, they had a dash pad. And of Of course, they always cracked, as you can imagine. Other than that, the sort of face of the dash is pretty much unchanged. You can see a couple instruments there, a speedometer and typically a clock. This one has a speedometer and a tachometer, you know, radio, etc. This ashtray and clock over here is an accessory, so normally that would just be an ashtray like you see here. So this is not necessarily a Lowlight Ghia thing, it's an accessory that was added on this car. You can see the grab handle on the Lowlight, really nice, trimmed with upholstery, versus the later sort of plastic looking one on a non-Lowlight. Interior pretty similar overall, small back seat, looks about the same on both, but you can see on this Lowlight the upholstery is just a lot nicer looking. You can see the seats here, pretty similar overall. There's some subtle differences between this and either a later Lowlight or a non-Lowlight like you see here. These seats, for those of you that have been around Volkswagens, you probably heard of thin back seats on the early Lowlight Ghias. That's because you can see how sort of thin the top of this is here. It comes up almost to a point, versus later Lowlights and then later Ghias like this, the seat was much thicker all the way up. So if you ever hear about thin back seats, they're talking about these here, like on early Lowlight Ghias. Other than that, that's about the major difference in these cars. Cosmetically, easiest to see a Lowlight just by these small kind of rectangular tail lights, or again the headlights that sit much lower on the fender where their name comes from. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thanks. Bye.